Well, welcome to this quarter's Tangram Talks. We are excited today to have a couple of great individuals from NOSS with us to talk about remote supports. So I'm going to turn it over to Ben and Michael to introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of background about what NOSS is.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Doucette. I'm Director of Development with Night Owl Support Systems, or NOSS, how we are usually referred to today. And NOSS, before Ben gets into his introduction, NOSS is a remote supports company. So we use technology and live caregivers together to essentially provide independence for people with disabilities. So there's a lot more that goes into that, so I'll kind of stop there because I know we're going to have some good discussions, but I'll pass it over to Ben.
Yes, I am Ben Richter. I am the Director of Special Projects with NOSS, and that was a very good, succinct intro for Night Owl. That was really nice. So I'll just echo what he said.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. This is a great opportunity to kind of share information about remote supports to our clients and families and staff. And so we really just want to kind of jump in and learn about, who is really a great candidate for remote supports? How do we know who those folks are? How do we identify them when we're meeting in teams? So I'm going to let you guys kind of answer that question.
Perfect. Well, I'll also start with maybe some info on NOS in general and maybe some background because that can kind of lead into, who's a good fit for some of this as well. So, Night Owl Sports Systems, we're based out of Madison, Wisconsin. We've been here doing remote supports in one form or another for over 22 years. So we're the first remote supports provider of any kind, the oldest existing one in the country. We started at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is, again, here in Madison, Wisconsin, at the Weissman Center. The Weissman Center is an outreach and research center. It is a proud history of developing a lot of services and thought leadership in terms of disability services. So we're really proud to be from there. Eventually, we exited the academic world and entered the private sector to be able to serve more people outside of our local area and to do a little bit more in some other states. So the idea behind remote supports with Night Owl, with NOS, is that we assume everyone could potentially live a little bit more independently, whatever that might mean for each person. And so we try to take that approach when we're thinking about who's a good candidate for remote supports. The goal of this service is always independence. So if we're not supporting someone and really aiding or helping them on their journey towards independence, then that's already maybe a place where we say, okay, is this a good fit or not? From there, there's a lot of different things in terms of the home that the individual might be living in, the individual and their diagnosis, some scenarios that might happen as well that will color and lead us towards what might be the best way to support them. But essentially, the idea behind independence is that there's folks out there that they might have a certain set of number of hours of support in person every week, and do they truly need that? I think that the best case scenario is we all know somebody that has 24 hours of support, but do they truly need 24.00 hours of support? Could there be 1 hour here and there? Could it be overnight where someone's maybe sleeping through the night and it's pretty safe and secure and doesn't need a ton of traditional support? So really, the question of who's a good candidate is sort of a big one. It really depends. We presume everyone has the ability to use remote supports until we come to a point or a fact that shows us that we can't. But from there, again, just some common kind of uses. Again, maybe someone is trying to keep some independence. Maybe they've had a new event. Maybe they had a seizure, and there's a nurse who's maybe recommending some more staff time. Is there an opportunity around that to keep some independence, to allow individuals to really to live without as much staff as they have. So it really does. It starts with there, as well as people that maybe just are able to live on their own and maybe they're being independent already, but one area is really causing them issues. Maybe medication administration. Maybe they're taking their own meds, but they still forget to take one every once in a while. Will a reminder check-in work? Will a medication dispenser with us work as well? Those are options there. So really, it works for a wide variety of individuals. It really is person-centered at the end of the day. So we start with no assumptions, get to know each person, and decide if we can support them, how to do it together.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I really, I think it's such a valuable service for individuals who are really striving for that independence and more alone time. Um, can you talk about some of the benefits? I know you touched on that a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more about the benefits for someone using remote supports?
Yeah, I think the benefits, just as we kind of talked about the setup and who might be a good fit, really does depend on each person's scenario as they start using our services. But some of the benefits that I know that we've seen people experience is, first and foremost, independent. You're going to probably get sick of hearing the word independence on this episode because that truly is the goal and always has been. So that's one sort of benefit. The next is really safety and security. You can't truly live independent if you're also not safe and secure at the same time. So we have situations where, there's going to be a call tree that we have at our location. If something were to happen, at the end of that call tree for everything is local EMS services. For safety and security, maybe someone has the ability to live alone. Maybe they get confused when they go outside. Maybe they have a neighbor that is a little bit of a interesting influence on them. So safety and security just around every aspect of their life is something that people can benefit through remote supports as well. And then just peace of mind. There's a lot of folks that we support that don't need a ton of traditional support either from staff members in their home or even from us. They're already pretty independent. They're living their lives pretty autonomously, but maybe there's some social aspect to their day. Maybe they get lonely. Maybe they sometimes get scared when they've been alone for maybe a certain amount of time. So there's a lot of folks that we support where maybe there's just a check-in call in the morning to tell them that, hey, as you go live your life today, you've got Night Owl here to support you if you need it. There's another scenario where we we started creating a plan for an individual who was very independent, went to work every day, and made his lunch for his work the night before. Put it in his lunchbox, put it in his refrigerator, and went to sleep. Well, sometimes during the middle of the night, this man's roommate would go into the refrigerator, eat his lunch out of the lunchbox, close it up, and then this gentleman will bring an empty lunchbox to work. And that's not good for anybody. So all we do for this individual, if we put any devices in this person's home, all we would be doing is maybe uh, decreasing independence, maybe making him dependent on something that he doesn't truly need. All we do is call him twice in the morning to make sure that there's still food in his lunchbox. And if there isn't, he knows how to, remedy that situation from there. So for that person, all that person needs is a phone call. If we've got so many cool tech options and all of this, if we were to try and force something into someone's home, then that obviously wouldn't be the best case scenario. So those are just some of the general benefits. I think if you just sort of think about what independence might mean for you, or more freedom or more autonomy, that could mean a ton of things. And that's the same for the people that we support.
There's
Sure.
two. Could I add two little things? I want to expand on the safety and security part because I really think Michael hit it well. But a lot of times, people think that remote supports is the absence of staff, and it's not. It's staff paying attention and getting information, remotely, like through technology. So there is still a remote support professional, is what we call them in the remote supports industry, that is akin to a DSP, is just not physically present. And so that's another layer of how we create this supported alone time, where it's sort of a middle level between absolute unsupported alone time where this person is just doing their own thing totally independently, and staff support time. Because traditionally, I mean, 20 years ago, there was no option in between. There was just hours where you have staff and hours where you don't have staff. And now there's a third option you can put in the middle, which for a lot of folks creates like a flexibility that's really beneficial to achieve those other parts that Michael was talking about. Um, and as far as safety and security goes in Indiana specifically, one of the things I think that it's important for folks to know, especially family members and self-advocates, is that within the waiver, where remote supports as a service, it is actually mandated that a backup person be established in the plan before the provision of remote supports. So that means that there has to be someone who is designated, either a paid staff person, usually a DSP with their residential provider, or a family member or guardian who is going to go to the home. Because one of the first questions we always get asked is, well, what happens if they do need someone? Right? Like you're doing these remote supports, people need help, real help, a person there. And so, one thing that I would say to put people's mind at ease is that no remote supports setup goes into operation without that plan in place to identify exactly who is going to go to the home if that person does need that in-person help. So those are just two areas where, the safety and security component are how they work, I suppose.
And I think, another benefit that I think of when I listen to you guys is just the ability to build confidence in people, building that confidence that, yes, I can do these things. I think is such a huge benefit for people.
Well, and there's like this there's a couple things with that. I'm so glad you said that, Joni. So there's a couple parts of, like, there's so many things that we take for granted as people who don't need staff, right? So like us, family members, whatever, who may not have a disability. There's so many like little things that you do every day that would be impacted if you had a person in your home. Like if you've ever had to call a plumber, wait around for the plumber to show up, you're like, when the plumber's in your house, you're not at ease. There's a person who's doing a job in your house, and like that's the most like analogous situation that I can think for someone to try to get in that headspace of like, what does it take away from you? And it's not like they're not doing anything wrong. They could be perfectly nice. They could be helpful, but it's still not you in your home, you know? And so there's a part of like getting people to that point where they can just sort of relax, really like sit in their underwear on the couch and eat Cheetos and watch their show, like or whatever the case may be, but just have that sort of like laid back like attitude that's really hard to like identify in terms of and like talk about, I guess. But once you think about it, you can sort of understand what is achieved that's sort of ineffable with remote supports. And then another part as well, like you said, is there's times where even the best staff sometimes can maybe limit the activities of daily living that an individual does because they're being helpful. It's almost like, I can make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but if someone's like, "Oh, I can make that for you, no problem," like I'd be happy to help. It's like, no, but me making it is part of me taking that independence. And it's like most staff are motivated by all the right reasons. They're very helpful and all of that. But there are times where, especially in this age of the staffing shortage, where you have situations where people aren't maybe they don't even feel comfortable speaking up and saying, I would like to do this, you know? Or maybe it's, I enjoy having someone doing it for me. I don't have to do it myself, but I would be more satisfied and fulfilled if I did it myself. So there's like all these different dynamics of like having a person in your home where if you exchange some of those hours for these supported alone time hours, you're able to achieve more in terms of like taking responsibility for the activities of daily life.
Sure.
And I'll say I'll add one thing quickly is that whether it's confidence or just your individuals getting used to living independently and making their own decisions and living, we have folks that almost graduate from our services, and we'll get a note and we'll we'll see that a home is maybe discontinuing our service, and obviously our first thought is, oh no. So we reach out and see what's going on, what's wrong, what else can we do. There's been cases we've been told, well, nothing, because this individual has been living independently, and they feel like they can really do it on their own now, and we almost get quote unquote fired, and it feels great. It feels great. It's, I think, the only scenario maybe where getting fired is really the ultimate goal. So we would love to see people use our services and then take that as a springboard onto, other things where they might not need us or anybody or anything else to help them live their lives. So that's the ultimate goal. And whether that's confidence or just you're now used to living and doing things on your own, that ultimately is what we'd like to see.
Sure. Well, I am excited to learn more and learn how you guys do this. So can you talk to me a little bit about the equipment that you use, how equipment gets installed? Let's find out like how this actually works.
Good question. All right. What the heck is this remote supports thing that we've been talking about for a bit? Absolutely. So we've been talking a lot about remote, independence and through, live caregivers and all of that as well. The main idea is that we do have a set of technology that we could put into the hands and homes of the people that we support that eventually will connect them with our folks and our monitoring station, to allow them to, again, live without staff, right? So our tech is, in terms of our technology, we really do see the technology as simply a toolbox. It just is a group of tools that we have at our disposal to make sure we're supporting each person the right way. We don't always have to use every tool. Not every piece of technology in there is going to be right for every person. But it's looked at that way. It's not the focus of the service. It is really just maybe peripherals and tools that we use to make sure that we're supporting people. But with that said, our tech approach is really one that's sensor based. And what does that mean? That's kind of a two-sided coin. One, our devices tend to be smaller, discreet, maybe more lower tech than higher tech, but in the goal of being behind the scenes and discreet. We don't want homes to feel like they've got all this technology coursing through them. We want homes to feel like home, even if they're being supported by us. We also don't want these devices to be the focus and the main focal point of a person's day. We have a lot of people that we support that might have uh, uh, opportunities to tamper with devices or maybe remove devices and do things with that. Smaller devices and things that are maybe harder to notice right off the bat do truly make a difference. So that's really the first side of our tech approach, is that we have kind of lower tech, more it's sensing how things are going, letting individuals live their lives, and then coming to support them only when they're needed. So that's really that support, that sensor-based idea. The second side to that coin is that we don't use cameras within homes to constantly surveil individuals. We can use camera-equipped devices in other ways, like tablets for communication and maybe a Ring doorbell on the outside of the home. But we really do take dignity of risk extremely seriously. We feel that surveilling individuals with cameras not only is a hard thing to do from a bandwidth perspective for us, but we feel is not truly, leading towards independence for everyone that is going to be using that setup. Now, I want to make it kind of a disclaimer, because there's some other remote supports vendors that are out there that we feel do a great job, and we're members of a coalition with them, and some of them use cameras where we don't. So we feel there are maybe individuals where that could be done, but for us, we really want to avoid maybe that level of intrusion. If we were going to use a camera equipped device, it will always be connected with something else happening. Maybe a door sensor going off, and then we check the Ring doorbell outside. Maybe there's a pager button that they could press to let us know that they'd like to have a conversation, and then we could try to ring them on a tablet. We would never just duck in and dip and see what's happening on a camera equipped device at all. So that's kind of different between us and maybe some other vendors. So I definitely wanted to get that in there. But essentially, these devices, we've got stuff like door sensors and motion detectors, fall sensors, things that are truly just sitting static and waiting for things to happen, all the way up to maybe some slightly more higher tech devices that we both use now and we're rolling out in the future. This involves medication dispensers to help individuals administer their own medications. This involves wearables that look for things like biometrics that might be leading towards an event like maybe a seizure or something else. Wearables that will have capabilities for geofencing and knowing where someone might be in the community and making sure that they're safe there, as well as just more communication options. I think we're seeing that since the pandemic, a lot of individuals with disabilities and without, and on their caregiving team, are more comfortable with anything, remote conversations, remote meetings, things like that. So we're also looking at, rolling out a tablet with our own, NOSS Connect app on there to have some conversations too. So really the tech, as tech changes, we're just seeing what other tools might be really beneficial for the people that we support. Essentially though, all of those devices, all of that technology is connected to our monitoring station. So we've got a live monitoring station here in Madison, Wisconsin, where all of our RSPs work. Think of them as kind of a remote DSP, remote support professional. And they are there reacting to devices going off, making those proactive check-ins that we mentioned before. And that's that extra level. It's very similar to assistive tech, where you've got technology making sure that things are happening and assisting you in your life. But this is technology that's linked to our live team 24/7, 365. So that if the situation doesn't need any response, okay, let's just make sure that we note that and move forward. But if there is something we could do to help, then we do it from there. The last thing I'll say in terms of kind of setting that up is that we have a team here called our consumer relations team. They are probably the linchpin of our company that holds all of the different pieces together. I mentioned our RSPs and our monitoring station that are waiting for technology to send us, information. Ben mentioned there's an on-call person that's, in the area. That's coordinated by this team as well. So this is the team that really meets with someone's team and with them themselves, if they'd like to, and decide together what might be the best array of technology and the best plan for reactions and things like that for each person. We start with the clean slate. We start with no assumptions, no technology, no reactions, have some really great conversations with the person's team, decide together what might be the best way to support them. From there, we decide an installation plan. Our technology is pretty easy to install. A lot of it is plug and play. There's really no alterations to the home itself, except for maybe a smoke detector into the ceiling. So it's very easy to move it around, as well as to change what we have in someone's home at any time. So our consumer relations team, not only do they help set up that plan, they're watching throughout the time that someone's using our service to see if there's any changes that need to be made. Maybe we want to set up a device just to track behavior instead of really monitor it in real time. We could do that and give some more information to someone's team. A great example is maybe activity in the kitchen. So activity in the kitchen, if someone maybe in the middle of night is going into the fridge and maybe having a snack when they shouldn't be, we are not going to stop anyone from going in there or even say, hey, what's going on? Because that's getting into areas that we're not really comfortable with. However, maybe someone's team might just want to know how many times someone's gotten up in the middle of the night, gone to the bathroom, and then got distracted and went to the kitchen instead of going right back to bed. So that's just a classic example. We're happy to collect that info and then we pass it on to people's teams and reporting, in reports and all of that. So essentially, though, that's kind of the plan. We work together with someone's team from the very beginning to when we go live with the service to any changes until we're quote unquote fired. We try to make sure that if there's any changes, we can make them pretty quickly as well. So.
And I want to give, if I can, just a little bit more resolution because I really like that example you gave of the kitchen activity. And I'm just trying to imagine what a family member might be thinking right now. It's like, how do you know? How do you know if they're going into the kitchen? You know, like you don't have cameras, you just said it. How do you
Yeah.
know? So, just to give you an example of how like the setup of the home influences what technology is used, the activity of the person that we know about because staff have been in the home, like how that influences what technology is chosen. So, for example, we could do something like a door sensor on a bedroom door, right? So then you can tell if the door opens. Well, that doesn't tell you if the person left or not. It just tells you if the door is open. So maybe it's cold in their room. They want to open the door. Okay, so then you can add a motion sensor into the kitchen as well, right? So you can start to add different pieces where sequences of information ping, door open, ping, kitchen activity, ping, door open. You can begin to sort of understand the activity in the home through these different sensor signals that we're receiving in real time. And based on what is occurring, and this goes back to the consumer relations team Michael was talking about, there's a preset definition of like what we're supposed to do. There's no guessing and checking. There's no, it's not just freewheeling. We'll reach out because we feel like it. No, it is part of the plan that is established at the intake process with us. So all of those pieces, and it could be someone who likes to go sit on the porch and smoke. There's a lot of individuals we serve who are smokers, and so we have specific things. I know one individual presses the button. He has a button that we installed right next to his door. He presses the button. If the button comes before the door sensor, we know that he's going out to smoke. Right? So there's different ways you can arrange these different things and you can assign them different meanings and then have them relate to different responses from the RSP. And I think it's one of the things that's difficult for family members to understand just because they don't have any experience with it for the most part is that there's such a wide range of options. Like it is so versatile. It is almost as versatile, I would say, as in-home staff can be, right? They can be super involved, they can be a little bit more laid back, they can be just watching for certain things to happen and then helping out a person. So like, there may be someone who's really independent but just needs transfers, right? Has mobility issues. And similarly, there's huge amounts of variation in what remote supports can do for different people based on their specific needs as well. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a window into how that example Michael talked about might actually occur just to help people start to think about how remote supports works in the home.
That's a great Ben. Thanks for because that made me think of one other thing that I forgot to mention too is that we could set up different reactions to things, different planned activities based on different times of the day, different days of the week. If let's say an individual goes to see their parents for the holidays, and they're not going to be in that house for 15 minutes or 15 days, I should say. We'd like to be told that, we're going to be checking on that first day of the 15 and we're going to let the team know, regardless, hey, we don't see any activity, what's going on? And then if that team lets us know, we're flexible enough to make notes in our system to say, yep, let's turn it off for now. This, Jeff's at the family, or maybe someone needs to go into the hospital for a little bit as well. So we could be very flexible in terms of schedules during the day, doing different things based on the time of day and things like that as well.
That's very interesting that you brought that up. Just to add one little thing, I know a lot of times, like staff can call off, and it's not, maybe they're actually genuinely sick, and it would be dangerous for them to go into the home of an individual, right? That's a situation where you could call us up and we could turn remote supports on. So like it's one of those situations where it covers for exigencies, things that happen that you can't account for, you can't plan for. And the reverse is true as well. Say mom and dad come for dinner. They're bringing a casserole to the individual's house and they're going to eat dinner with them. Well, for those 4 hours, we can shut it off. It's completely customizable based on, people's lives oftentimes there's a routine, but sometimes it departs from that routine, and we're flexible with that.
Great. So we talked a little bit about how you guys communicate with teams and how you react to seeing those sensors. And talk to me a little bit about emergency situations. Like, how do you know if there's an emergency situation happening in the house? How do you connect with the correct people in that situation? If somebody was home and they did feel unsafe, is there a way for them to connect with you and say, hey, this is what's going on. I don't feel safe right now. Can you help me? Can you kind of walk through some of those situations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the caveat that I maybe start with whenever this question gets asked, is that risk is not something that anyone can totally remove 100% from their life. And honestly, our thoughts on that is that we wouldn't want anyone to do that either. Dealing with risk is a part of being an independent person and living your life in this day and age. So with that said, emergencies do fall outside of that normal level of risk. So while we're still allowing people to live independently, as I mentioned before, safety and security and just risky situations, um, emergency situations, those are all part of it. So if you don't have a plan for that, then you don't have a plan for being independent during those scenarios. So the first thing I'll say is that and I mentioned we have call trees for everyone that we support. And I meant this, at the very end of every call tree, we have local EMS services, fire, ambulance, police, all of that. We load those in directly from the local the area that the home is in. So we support people in 20 different states, whether it's in Bloomington, whether it's in Boston, Massachusetts, whether it's here in Wisconsin. We are able to set up whatever the local services are at the end of that. But a lot of it is really all hands on deck here. So I'll kind of give you the most common alert we get in this category is really a smoke detector going off. So if a smoke detector goes off, and we're not going to replace smoke detectors in homes. We assume the homes we're supporting already have smoke detectors, and a lot of them are smart smoke detectors. They're reaching out to EMS services themselves. But if we see one, we're going to sort of take an all hands on deck approach here in our monitoring station. So there will be one RSP that will get the alert and start trying to reach out to the individual. That's always our first thing, because a lot of times smoke detector, maybe it's going off because they tried to make some food. Maybe they made some macaroni and cheese and they added an extra 0 to the timer, and it's starting to smoke. Or they just forgot to turn the burner off and now it's starting to smoke or something like that. So we'll try to call the individual as we're having other staff members in our monitoring station start to call emergency services. The easiest thing to do in this case, if there's a false alarm, if it just ends up being a smoking or a cooking issue, is calling the fire department and telling them to turn around. So that we're not bashful or shy. We in fact, even in the planning stage, if there's anything special with the home itself in terms of getting in, is there a super box? Is there a code on the gate? Is there a gate? Is there a gate with a patrol person in there? We want to know some of those things, because if we're going to dispatch emergency services over there, it'd be nice to give them some of that information, especially knowing historically in this country how if you call, police services in all aspects to help someone with disabilities, it can sometimes go, unfortunately, in the wrong direction. So we try to get as much information on the person and the home in general, so we could pass that on to emergency services when we dispatch them. But essentially, that's kind of our approach if we were to get like an alert like that. But let's say if someone reaches out, and we do have individuals that maybe as they're living alone, maybe there's a storm and they're scared. Maybe there's a task that they tried that all of a sudden maybe something happened and they feel unsafe at this moment. first of all, we'll try to even kind of uncover those possibilities during the intake process when we're creating that plan. We say, will this person, reach out during storms or stuff, are they prone to do something like that? Just so we're ready and we know, okay, this might be normal activity versus something that is truly out of the ordinary. But from there, we have even the first part of that call tree as we're talking to an individual, we're going to have that in mind, but we're going to still talk to that person and see what's going on. If it's possible for us just to have a quick conversation to help de-escalate an individual or help get that person back to a better state. That's something that our staff is prepared, able to do, and does in many cases. A lot of times an individual just needs someone to talk to. And to your last question in this, Joni, not only do we have a way for people to reach out to us, I think that's a key part that a lot of states try to put into the remote supports services that you could use in that state. And Ben, I think that's the case in Indiana as
100%.
well.
Yep.
You truly need, each person needs a quick and easy way to get a hold of us. And for us, that's either the phone number of our monitoring station put into someone's cell phone. We have personal pagers that are sort of like life alert pendants and quick buttons that someone could press. I call them the get our attention buttons. They're for that, for whatever reason someone might need our attention. Whether it is a storm and they're scared, or the person just wants to tell us their joke of the day. We do have an individual that does that. And you know what? It might not be an emergency to us, but if that person doesn't tell us his joke of the day, that's sort of out of his routine, and that's not that could be an emergency to him. So for us, emergency is really, could mean different things. Safety and security, having local EMS is always the last resort, and then we're more than willing to have conversations with individuals, again, based on their background and their plan. Maybe there's an individual where if we reach out, it's going to make things worse. And so hopefully we could learn that during the intake process, and maybe we call someone to go over there instead. So
Yeah.
Sure.
I just wanted to add a little bit, if that's all right, Michael and Joni. So I feel like there's three, and Michael talked about them all, but there's three sort of categories of emergency. There's the totally unexpected, like it would never show up in a plan. There's the ones that you can sort of understand or plan for, like a fall risk. You can identify if someone's a fall risk. That's a risk factor that's known, it's documented. And then there's the emergencies like you just talked about, where it may not be an emergency to us, it may not require EMS, but it is something that is urgent and important to the individual. And I think what I've heard from family members a lot of times is, again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, from family members a lot of times is, well, what happens if they are choking on food that they made or whatever? And the answer to that is a couple things. Well, if they're a choking risk, if this is a risk that has been identified, we can make sure that they have the pendant, right? So then it's boom, right there, right? But also, if choking is a sincere hazard, it may not be something where remote sports is appropriate during eating times, right? So you can plan around that. You can say, well, those hours wouldn't be hours that are suitable for remote supports because they need someone there in case they choke. But if this is just a random choking event, like for me, like I could choke. I'm a human. We have esophagus, whatever the plural of that is. I have an esophagus, and so like if I were to eat something and choke right here, like you could say, well, what happens then? But it's like, what would happen if staff was in the other room and they didn't hear it? Like we like to think that, remote supports will cover all these bases, but like Michael said at the very outset of his answer to your question, it's like you have to sometimes, especially for family members, and I know it's hard, but you have to sort of take a step back and be like, would it be different if staff were in the home, or would it be different if they were alone, which is where I hope they end up, right? So like if it is the case that, this is just a general risk that everyone has to deal with, then that's something that maybe remote supports can't help mitigate, aside from like, having a pendant available or what have you. But you just have to realize that sometimes there are some emergencies that might arise that are no different from any of the other horrible emergencies that can happen to any one of us. And our ability to do something special about it, maybe, not what you're hoping for, but akin to what would be available for any other person who's having that emergency who does not have a disability.
Thank you for kind of walking through some of that process. I want to kind of turn now, I guess, a little different direction, because we've talked a lot about remote supports at home. What if somebody needs remote supports in the community? What if they need that support, not necessarily having a staff person with them all the time, but being able to have that connection if they need it when they're out and about? Is that something that you guys offer?
Yeah, I will say absolutely. So there's different, obviously different tools in the toolbox based on what's needed, and how independent in the community someone already is. But absolutely, we Ben, I don't know. Do you have thoughts on this one?
Well, yeah, so we have the Numera Libris, which is
Mhm.
sort of like a mobile PERS. So
Mhm.
that's a way that an individual could get in contact with an RSP while they're out and about. So that's just a pendant that they would wear. They're walking around. If they're like, I'm lost, I'm overwhelmed, I'm whatever the situation may be, they press the button, they can get in touch with us really quick. So that's one way. We also have a couple other options as far as technology goes. So like if say a family member's like, oof, I just don't know about them going out. It like freaks me out, like they have the skills, I know, but people could take advantage of them, people could be mean, whatever the case may be, the general concerns. We have a device that has geofencing capabilities that we don't personally monitor, but has like a third party access. So that way a family member could get in and be able to see where the individual is, because we don't want to be constantly keeping tabs on individuals if it's not a situation where that is required. That's a privacy issue in our mind. But if a family member wants to keep tabs on where an individual is because they're wearing this device in the community, that is totally their prerogative. So we have different options as far as like things that can help individuals reach out to us, communicate if they do feel like it's getting like too much or they're lost or whatever the case may be. But ultimately, it's not as sophisticated as it would be in the home, just because the home is a stable environment you can control as far as like where you put stuff. Outside, things can happen, buses can be late, and so on and so forth. So we feel like it's most important to make it easy for them to get in touch with us, make it easy for their location to be sent to the appropriate people. Say if they're like, I really want staff, like I thought I could do this, but I really need staff right now, then we can say, okay, we pull up their location for that time, we send it to the staff person can go and make sure they're all right. So we just say sit tight, they'll be there in 10 minutes. So there's options for what we can do there, but we do think it's very important to be able to support people in the community for sure.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful information too. So I guess the next thing I want to kind of talk about is if somebody's interested in services, if they're listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, I think this would be a perfect fit for either myself or my loved one. How do they get started?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would start with maybe educating yourself with some information that's on our website. So you go right on our website. It's nossllc.com. So NOSS LLC.com. We've got explainers for tons of the technology we've been talking about. We've got success story videos and individuals with disabilities that we support on those videos talking about some of the services and benefits that they could experience. But really it starts one of two ways, and almost one way, even. So it really does start with the conversation. A lot of our first contacts with individuals and their teams are maybe a care coordinator or a guardian or someone on their team that is on the fence. Maybe they've noticed something, they've noticed some information, some behavior that might tell them that maybe this person's pretty independent, maybe they don't want or need staff in their home at all times. It really does work with a quick discovery type conversation. Like let's get together, especially if you're on the fence, and just talk quickly about this individual to see if we're in the right ballpark, if we're together thinking that this is someone that both sides are comfortable using this sort of service. That's really the very beginning, educating yourself and just kind of having these conversations. From there, kind of the structural path to getting it started is on our website as well. So we have a referral form that you go right online and fill out. It's not there to really say you need to know every single thing there, but it gives us some starting points, gives us some information that we truly need about the person, and then also it kicks off the process here internally behind the scenes. So from that point on, um, uh, we mentioned the consumer relations team before. That's the team that gets together with whoever filled out that referral, whoever that person's team is. If we have that quick discovery conversation before, it's like, hey, let's schedule something right now to have this conversation. And essentially it's one or several meetings where you get into the nitty gritty of what the support plan is. We start going through a person's scenario and day, things that them and their team are concerned with potentially maybe living on their own. Talking about the house itself. Is it a one level, two level? Are there sliding garage doors that we need to worry about? Is there a dog in the house as well that might trip up some of these motion detectors? All of that, all of the T's that needed to be crossed and I's that need to be dotted are discussed in that meeting. And then from that point on, we have as many meetings as we can, as many informational meetings to make sure everyone's on the same page. When we think that plan's in a good spot, we decide, okay, let's move forward. Here's how we could get it installed, whether it's a contractor from us or a guided self-install, because a lot of our stuff is pretty simple to get onto the home. We set all that up, we program all the devices, we ship it out, we get it installed, and then we start from there. And it really truly is a start. It's not the finish line. It's not set it and forget it. It's set it and let's make sure we're still doing the right thing every single day. So a great way to kind of illustrate that too is like, maybe, as Ben mentioned, we're going to ask for things like fall risks and things like that. But maybe there's some things that weren't explicitly called out that our team is going to look out for as well. Maybe someone's supposed to get ready for work and leave around 7:30. Are they leaving around 5:30 now? Maybe that wasn't something that was told to us, but could that be a change of behavior because services have changed? Could it be maybe a sign of an onset of dementia or something else like that? We probably can't make any of those conclusions, but those observations we could make and take those observations and give it to someone's team. So but that really doesn't happen unless that whole process is followed. The consumer relations team is so experienced here. They've been through so many plans of the people that we support. We support over 1,500 people at this point. They've seen a lot of different scenarios. They've got this creative vibe and creative fire to them in terms of when we hear a scenario that maybe is outside the box, it almost charges them with more energy to see if we could get something that works for that individual. So it really is a group effort, though. It starts with you coming to us and maybe asking some questions and maybe filling out the referral if you feel comfortable. But from that point on, it's going to be a group effort. We're going to work together and make sure that we choose the things that we think are the best, and through observation we confirm that and make sure that it is.
And I want to add a couple things too, just for the Indiana specific side of things. So you obviously, as a family member or self advocate, you want to reach out to your case manager. So they're going to be the one who's going to be able to help guide you through the sort of official processes for this. So there's things with like depending on your current situation as far as the services you receive. So, for example, if remote sports is available as a waiver service in Indiana on the FSW and CIH waivers. So if you're on either of those waivers, you can get access to remote supports. It functions pretty much the same, except for the fact that if you're on the FSW waiver, typically you have a what's called a natural support, like a family member as the backup, as opposed to a like a DSP from a provider organization. So that's sort of the main difference between the two. But in either case, and this I want to stress this is very, very important. If you try remote supports and the individual does not like it, which happens, if you try it and they do not like it, they do not want it, they give it a genuine shot, and they're like, this isn't for me, you can go back to your staff. So you do not lose out on budget stuff. You do not lose out on dollars. There's no big repercussions. Indiana is a huge advocate of remote supports and technology in general for people with disabilities, and they do not want to penalize people for trying out the service. So that's one thing that's huge to know, is that you will not lose out on things if you try. So we encourage folks to at least try it out, if they have an inkling that it would work for their loved one or themselves.
To put your point, Ben, Indiana, out of all the 20 states we're in, we feel Indiana defines remote supports probably the best out of all of them. So it is really set up on the waiver side to make it as pain-free as possible. There's
And
definitely
robust.
and robust too. So yes.
And it's been around since 2009. So while this may be the first time you're hearing of it, I'm speaking directly to the family members or individuals. But if this might be the first time you're hearing of it, but it's been around for I'm not good at math, but that's 15 years. So yeah, Indiana was the first to adopt it as a waiver service. Back then it was called electronic monitoring, but they've updated it to remote supports and changed the definition to reflect what it is now. But they've had a lot of time to fix things, to tweak things, and it is not, this isn't some experiment. This isn't some brand new thing. You're not, throwing your loved one will not be a guinea pig. This is a tried and true service. Like Michael says, we're one of 7 providers we know of in Indiana, I think, and we serve like 1,500 people, not all in Indiana, but so tons and tons of people are using this service successfully, and tons of people have tried it and aren't using it anymore because it wasn't a good fit for them, but at least they know, you're not leaving it on the table, which I think is really important, because that's it's one thing to never try it because you have doubts. It's another thing to try it and say, no, at this point in his life, at this point in her life, it's just not right, So
So I appreciate that you bring up that trialing of the service, right? Because I think that is something that is so important to people. Can you talk about what a trial period or what that kind of looks like as you're getting started?
So
Yeah.
certainly.
Oh, go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so there's a couple things. So if an individual is receiving a residential habilitation daily rate, then the authorization doesn't need to change for remote supports. The ISP will need to change a little bit to reflect that you're trying out these remote supports. The case manager will have to be involved, but you won't have to exchange individual hours of anything for remote supports, which is just sort of an administrative thing that's easy, I guess. Now, in terms of what that actually looks like on the ground, is, I know, and Michael can speak more to this, but we've done times where, let me back up. The reason I bring up the billing aspect is because it is important to know that you can't double bill a waiver for services, right? You can't bill for a service and another service concurrently at the same time. So what we often do with people in the residential habilitation daily rate, how that works with remote supports is the provider, so Tangram in this instance, would bill for that daily rate, and then they would just subcontract with us. Now that's getting into the minutia, but what that means for you as far as the trial is that any number of hours can be used with remote supports, and you can have a DSP as well. So there can be some hours of like some overlap where you have the system in the home, but you still have a staff person there. And then maybe after a week, you go to the staff person leaves for half the time, the remote supports is on the other half. And then you go to maybe 2 weeks of the remote supports is in the home, but we're having like we're documenting. I mean, we're always documenting things, but you maybe the frequency of reporting that you receive is daily as opposed to weekly or monthly. So we're really looking at these things. And our consumer relations team, even if you don't do a trial run, still does a 2 week touch base to make sure everything's looking good. So what you can have is this sort of graduated period where you're moving more and more into it. And then at the end of that, if say 2 weeks after that, so 8 weeks total, you decide this isn't for me, we uninstall the stuff and you go back to the staff service, to residential habilitation with DSPs. So it's really that simple. I mean, there's obviously, it is a logistical, not hurdle, but it is something you have to do to get it installed and uninstalled. But like Michael said, it's very discreet. They're small. It's not like we're running wires through your roof or through your basement or whatever. It's just sensors getting stuck on the wall in different places, and then a smoke detector that might be screwed in. So it is really in terms of like what it means functionally to try it out is it means you get a service, you install it, you can mix it and titrate it with the staffing services until the individual feels comfortable on their timeline, and then you can make the switch, or you can decide, hey, maybe this isn't for me.
Right. And we've talked a lot about hours, like how much time somebody uses remote supports. So it's really customizable, right? As far
Yeah.
as it could be as few hours as they need to.
It could
Yeah,
be 1 hour every 2 weeks, or so we have people who do 12 hours every night
Yeah.
from the time staff leaves until before they go to work in the morning. We have, I think that's the most common of the larger, but yeah, it's totally flexible. Michael, I'm sorry.
No problem. But I was just going to ask you if Indiana had, I don't think Indiana has any minimums or maximums, do they?
No,
Okay,
Indiana
right,
does
which is
not.
good. Yeah.
They
So,
keep it flexible.
and same thing for us, I think maybe just with how things are metric, probably 15 minutes would be the least amount, right? Maybe if because depending on billing units and stuff. But sometimes it's literally just a call during the day, or just one call in the morning to let someone know that they've got us essentially on call for them. Sometimes it's we we have a device like our smoke detector and our pagers will work whether the system is armed or not. It's just
Yeah.
it's unique amongst our devices. So maybe the person doesn't need any active traditional, assistance. Maybe there's no device that needs to be in place, but we put a smoke detector and pager just in case, just and for us, it's almost like how do you kind of calculate those hours? So a lot of the hours for us are passive as well, but just the hours where we're on, it could be 15 minutes, it could be 15 hours. I'm not sure we have anybody that we're 24 hours supporting, but Ben's correct.
Yep.
Right. Well, I want to say thank you for all the information. I've learned a lot today. I'm sure that the folks listening have learned quite a bit today as well. I do want to give you guys an opportunity to do one final pitch. If we have those people out there that are, really starting to kind of get those wheels turning of thinking about doing this.
Sure.
What is the one final pitch that you would give if they're kind of on the fence?
If someone's on the fence and they're wondering, okay, this may be a good fit, I'm not so sure. If someone's on the fence, please reach out. Like we are here. Please use this as a resource. No obligation, no pressure resource, just to have a conversation. I'll go on our website. We've got a contact form. You could put it right through there. That's a large part of our day here is just educating individuals on what's possible, on whether they're thinking about an individual is in the right track in terms of that, being a good fit for us as well. So if you're on the fence, reach out because we want to have a conversation with you. We're not going to pressure you. We're not going to try and fit a square peg into a round hole. If someone's not ready for our services, we don't want to be there. So we'll work with you to kind of hear your concerns, as well as if you're kind of just thinking on your own and you're on the fence, we might be able to have some other creative options for you that we know about that we haven't maybe even talked about today. So please, 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 please just see us as a resource for really anything. Let's say you're also maybe an area manager, or like, let's say you've got these individuals on board. Maybe you truly understand remote supports and you're like, this is going to work. I know it, no doubt. But you're having maybe issues getting the guardians and families on board as well. Please use us as a resource for that. Pull us into those meetings if you think that we could help explain some things and answer some questions to those groups. Many of us here are family members of people with disabilities. A lot of us are. A lot of us have a connection to somebody outside of work. And I feel like we really do well when we have those conversations with those families. We're not trying to, again, sell them on something that they don't want. We're there to try and help alleviate some fears, give them some examples and some ways that we might be able to address things. And look, we get it. This is your family member. This is a loved one. We understand. And that's why we want to be here as a resource. So whether it's you and you need some convincing or some help to think whether this person would be a good fit, or if you think they are and someone on their team is maybe needs a little bit more clarification, it all starts and ends with communication and with a conversation. So please reach out. From that point on, we'll do all the crazy fancy, forms and all the things that we need to do to get it going. But let's start with the conversation. Reach out. Let's have a chat.
Awesome.
100%.
Well, Ben, Michael, thank you guys for your time today. Thank you for the information and for sharing with us. And I am sure we're going to have people reaching out with more questions. So thank
We
you.
hope so. We love answering them.
Yeah, thanks, Joni. Really glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so
Thanks so
much.
much.